Hello and welcome. I am so excited to get to share this conversation today and introduce you to the wonderful Lauren Sapala. She's somebody who I've known now for almost 5 years and is a really stellar human being who I think you're going to connect with. So she is a writer and also coaches writers, specifically those who identify as INFJs, highly sensitive individuals, empaths, basically people who approach making art as a spiritual practice and want to marry those two things together, who really want to tap into their deeper, more connected, more juicy selves and create in the world in a way that is meaningful and rich and really highly aligned with their values and their inner heart. So I am thrilled to have this conversation with her. Lauren, thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Kay. I brought up so many of the different hats I wear. I'm a coach, I'm a writer, I'm a blogger, I'm now a teacher. I teach online classes. And yeah, I focus on INFJ, INFP personality types, people who are highly creative, highly intuitive, highly empathic.
I love it. So, Lauren, why don't you just start us off by telling us what are the things that you've been focusing on your work right now? What are some things that are really exciting you? And then knowing that my audience are all people who identify as on a spiritual journey in some way, if you could also speak to just how you view art as a spiritual practice and how those things combine.
Well, the class I just finished up was a writing and magic class. And in that class, I really focused on the role of intuition in making your art, in writing your book. And this is something that's overlooked in a lot of writing circles today. We live in a society that's very rational, very left brain. There are instructions and formulas, and you have to follow the instructions, and you have to be a success, and it's all about being productive. When you kind of flip that on its head and you say, I'm not really worried about productivity, I'm going to concentrate on my connection to my own heart and my connection to my own intuition. And I'm going to trust that writing a book is a co-creative process between me and the universe. Everything changes. And that's what I really teach. And that's what I coach people on as well, is connecting back to your heart, connecting back to your spirit, connecting back to your intuition, because that's when your unique energy comes out, your unique essence. Instead of just trying to follow the instructions or the formulas on how to write a book or how to make a piece of art.
Yeah. And I think artists get a lot of pressure to conform to those boxes because, commercially they work, right? Like if you do A, B, and C, you will probably be more likely to get an agent or get published or get something picked up, though certainly not necessarily. But what it really does is it does undermine your own confidence in yourself and your own internal connection because you're working from, as you said, a different part of your brain rather than the intuitive part.
Well, and I think that's actually kind of an illusion we have too, is if I do follow the instructions, I'm more likely to get an agent. I'm more likely to get picked up. Honestly, in today's writing world, I don't know that you are. I really don't know that you are. It's really kind of a crapshoot these days. There's so much content and there are so many content producers and there are so many books out there that you could do everything perfectly and still not get the agent or the publishing deal or what you've decided is, the gateway to achievement. And a lot of times it's much more satisfying to do it on your own. And you have a taste of this. I know you're an indie publisher and an indie author and an indie entrepreneur.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Because there's this sense of self-reliance. There's this sense of pride in creation. And there's something truly powerful about not waiting for some arbitrary gatekeeper to tell you you're good enough. And I think your point about things changing and the amount of content being really important because, I was talking with a writer friend who got their first book deal 18 years ago. And there's still this mentality, well, if you just keep trying to find an agent and you should just do it that way. And I'm like, I don't know if that's the case anymore. When agents are getting 50 submissions a day and they represent 15 people, it's like, is that really going to happen? But instead, taking your power back, owning your power and saying, I have something of value. I'm going to create my own niche. I'm going to create my own following, which you have done so well and have created such a beautiful tribe of highly sensitive individuals who just love and support your work and find community together with you.
Well, the other thing, about finding an agent these days is I talk to so many artists and creatives and writers who say, I would love to make art full time. I would love to be a full time writer and support myself in that way. So I have to get an agent. And it's kind of funny because I think if you really want to support yourself with your writing, getting an agent is going to probably bring you the least amount of income possible. If you do it on your own, you're going to get such a bigger cut of the royalties, and you're going to have so much more control over your marketing and who you market to and what you're doing to get your work out there. That making sustainable income as an artist these days, it actually is in your best interest to go out on your own and really do the indie thing.
Yeah. I mean, I can just speak from my own experience between doing YouTube, doing private coaching, doing my writing, like all those three things together have created, certainly not rich by any means, but a comfortable lifestyle, something that works for me. I'm making about the same as I did doing corporate work that I absolutely hated. And to say, why do we create? Is it to share something of value, to put our message out there? Or are we creating because we want attention? And not that there's anything wrong with attention, but are you seeking publishing because it will give you a stamp of validation to tell you you're good enough, which is often was my thing of like, tell me I'm good enough, tell me I'm worthy, as opposed to saying, hey, I am worthy, let me offer this thing to the world.
Oh, yeah, that's the big shift I went through too. I wanted an agent for years, and I just kind of banged my head against that door that wasn't opening for years and years. And at one point, I realized this is about my approval issues.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for someone to tell me I'm good enough. I'm waiting for someone to tell me that I've arrived. And once I realized that, and I said, well, I'm just going to self-publish as an experiment. I'm just going to see what happens. And I put my first book out there, The INFJ Writer. It was a radical transformation. It felt so good. Yeah. It's not like it was a bestseller. It's not like people were, rushing the gates to get a copy of it or camping out overnight. I think I sold, maybe 100 copies all told that first year. But people reached out. People messaged me and emailed me and said, I read your book. This has been really helpful. I'm seeing things in a different way. Even if they didn't say, this totally changed my life. They said, this was helpful. Thank you. And I felt so good. It felt like such a release. And it felt like such a relief. I had completed the creative cycle for years. I'd been writing and writing. And then I'd get to that one last part of the cycle and stop. The releasing and sharing your work. That's where I was halted for so many years. And when I did my experiment in self-publishing, I just thought, I'm never going back. This feels too good. It's fun. I like it. I'm never going back.
I love that. And I know something you and I have talked about too is about how the journey of creating and sharing our artwork is not only a healing medicinal experience for ourselves, but it's also a gift for people who are on analogous journeys, who are going through similar things and get to receive that and say, wow, this spoke to me in a resonant way. And if you hadn't put it out there, you would be both denying yourself and that other person about that experience of interacting with it.
And that's also how I brought in clients, because I wrote about my experience. I got so many of my coaching clients because they read my book, The INFJ Writer, and people would write to me and say, how do you know me? Are you spying on me? Do you live inside my head? How do you? And a lot of people to this day, they're like, oh, you're an MBTI expert. You must be certified. And I'm like, no, I just wrote about my own experiences. Yeah. That's literally it. I just wrote about the way I think and the things that I'm anxious about and the neuroses that I have. And it resonated with other people because I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who thinks those things in that crazy way. And I still do that to this day. All of my nonfiction books, all of my books really, I mean, they're all about me. But my nonfiction books, I just say, hey, I have been having this problem for years. And then I've talked to some other people and noticed they have it too. I think it might be linked to this. I'm not a scientist. It's just my opinion. Yeah. But putting it out there is healing for me, and it's healing for the people who find my work.
And I think it's also a good thing to acknowledge too that as somebody who also identifies as a spiritual guide, somebody who, tries to get out of their own way and channel something higher and let it come through, our job is not to be all things to all people. Our job is not necessarily to appeal to the widest demographic possible. Our job is to share what we've learned from the road for whomever it resonates with. And if that's 50 people, great. If it's 500 people, great. But we don't need to be, the Deepak Chopra or the Oprah Winfrey, where it's like millions of people relate to this.
I think that's another part of the learning journey of being an artist or a writer, because for so long so many of us hold the dream that we will be the next Oprah Winfrey, or we'll be on Oprah Winfrey's book club,
Right.
right? But millions of people will read our work, and you do kind of go around this turning point where you realize, I don't need millions of people, I just need some people.
Yeah.
And honestly, the number's not even really up to me. That's up to the universe. And that's when you start seeing, everybody has the potential to be of service in that way. Everybody has the potential to be of service to spirit. Some people, they might be raising a couple of kids. And those are the two people that they're influencing. Those are the two people that they are working with.
Right.
That's fine. That's their journey. Just because it's two people and not 2 million, it's not any less important. It's just a different kind of purpose. It's just a different kind of work, of service work.
Totally. You bring to mind to me something I've been talking a lot about the last couple of days, which is deconstructing the paradigms we've been given of what success is, what living well is as an American in contemporary culture. And for me, the message I learned, which I think is fairly typical, is you are successful if you hit a certain level of notoriety. You are successful if you hit these certain benchmarks that are rather arbitrary, but defined by certain quote unquote gatekeepers or certain holders of status in the world. And if you do these things, then you are successful. And we chase these golden rings. We chase them thinking, I will be happy, I will be happy. But even if we get them, we're then like, oh, this wasn't as fulfilling as I thought it would be. So how do we redefine the paradigms away from the consumerist, capitalist, American idea of more, better, bigger, louder, faster, and say meaning comes from connection? Meaning comes from the quality of my connections, not the quantity of them. Meaning comes from the impact that I'm making in individuals rather than, on book charts or on billboards. But that takes a conscious reprogramming, at least in my case, because of society.
Oh, yeah. When you said that, I was reminded I very rarely watch TV. I mean, like once every 8 months. And I turned on, we have like cable streaming for the internet. I turned on cable streaming the other day and saw a slew of commercials. And I thought, my God, if anyone is sitting and watching these, they are going to be driven insane. So there's, a commercial for like a Bowflex. So I'm supposed to be really fit and really ripped. And I'm supposed to work out on this thing every day and be this very muscular, beautiful specimen, followed by an ad for McDonald's and Cheetos. So I'm supposed to eat that because that tastes really good and it's going to be so yummy. And then followed by medication for diabetes and all the symptoms that I have now because and I'm like, people are going to be insane. Like,
Totally.
It's so many mixed messages and empty messages and messages just targeted at pain and pleasure trigger points of like, eat sugar, you're fat, you're sick, now buy a new car.
Yeah.
And the only solution is you got to turn it off.
Amen.
You got to turn it off. You got to turn off the TV. You got to kind of back away from Twitter. And I'm not like banning social media. Like, you don't need to like not ever engage online ever again. But be very mindful of the spaces that you're spending time in and the images that are coming to your eyeballs, the things you're reading and how you feel. When I was watching those commercials, I felt dizzy and confused and not good. And I took that meaning, I was like, oh, I feel not good. I need to turn this off. Yeah. And we are fed so much fear through the media. And I think some of us were so confused that it's hard to know when to turn it off. But I think that's the solution. Turn it off. Read a book. Go sit with a friend and have a cup of tea. Go for a walk. You know, block out 3 hours to just make art.
Yeah.
But slow down and spend time mindfully.
Mm. Yes, slowly.
So I went on a rant there. I'm
No,
very
I
passionate
love
about
this.
that
It's
topic.
also I'm passionate about too, because yes, that idea of slowing down and letting your things be meaningful, intentionally consuming when you choose to consume. And as you said, not becoming a Luddite, not saying all technology is bad, but using it mindfully. I know there's a statistic that says that the average person encounters somewhere between 4,000 and 10,000 pieces of advertising a day, even as simple as like a little logo on a t-shirt. And I had a similar response, like visiting my parents over Christmas, who just always have the TV on, and being lambasted by these commercials that all essentially say the same thing. As you said, you are not good enough, but if you buy this product or do this thing, then you will be better. That is the message of every
Oh,
commercial.
exactly.
You
That's
are
the
not good
message
enough.
behind everything, right? You are not good enough.
Exactly. And for myself as well, like last night during my meditation, I was very focused on saying, even with me being intentional about my media consumption, I'm realizing I'm addicted to my phone. Like, I can't go a day without checking my phone. I feel very uncomfortable. And I'm like, I don't think that's healthy. I should be able to say, I'm going to put my phone down for 24 hours and be totally fine, not jonesing to be like, oh, did I get a message? Did I get an email? Did someone need a reply? Because we are suffering, or at least I am suffering, from the constant barragement of stimulus and dopamine bursts from getting a little ping of recognition because someone liked a tweet. Like it's not a healthy way to live long term.
I have the same thing. I have addiction to my phone. And I think that when we let in media and the online world to that degree, and I'm guilty of this. Like I said, I have the same addiction to my phone. If I go a few hours without checking my phone, I start to feel antsy and weird. And it's boundaries, because if you feel the need to check and you feel like, oh, it's been 3 hours, I don't know if I can do it, then there's also this follow-up need of I need to address whatever it is that's been sent to me. So someone has commented on my tweet, I need to comment back right away. Someone sent me an email, I need to respond right away. So there's this added pressure and this sort of invasion of boundaries that, well, I need to be always available, I need to be always responsive, I need to be always on. And it makes you feel like you're never truly alone. You're never truly in solitude. You don't really have a whole afternoon spread out before you. You do, but you should be checking your email in there just to make sure nobody needs anything. And that invades on the boundary. And I do think it's detrimental. And I do think it undermines our sense of privacy and solitude and even our sense of being able to follow our own thoughts. And like I
Yeah.
said, I'm guilty of this as well.
Yeah, no, I same thing. Like I can correlate the feeling of joy and success, ephemeral word, in my meditation practice inversely correlates with the amount of time I'm on my phone and how often I check it. Like there is a direct correlation for me between my ability to focus and how much I engage with technology. And when we consciously seek this slower, mindful, rooted living, we just realize we can't have both in the way that we're used to it. And for me, saying like when we study happiness, when we study spiritual connection, when we study contentment, one of the key principles of that is downtime, where you're not receiving stimulus, where you are okay with doing nothing. And by doing nothing, I don't mean vegging out and watching TV, but literally just sitting and being like, oh, that's a nice tree. I'm just going to sit with this tree for a little bit. But when you have this little device inside by your side that is like, could give you every answer to every question you could think about and give you a little hit of validation that somebody was thinking about you, that tree seems a little less exciting. But it's junk food, it's candy, it gives you a sugar high that is not real.
I would think this is also a particularly important topic for highly sensitive people and highly
Yes.
intuitive people because we also tend to be highly anxious and
Mm-hmm.
accommodating and people pleasers. So
And
we do get the little dopamine hit, but we also feel like I need to constantly be accomplishing things and productive and responding to other people's needs. That's a default with us. A lot of times it's a survival mechanism from childhood of like, I'm so sensitive and I can intuit what everybody is going through around me, but nobody really knows what I'm going through because they're not as intuitive and I'm very sensitive.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to be on high alert all the time to anticipate and meet everyone else's needs.
Amen.
And now it's like, well, now you have a device in your pocket that will help you people please even more on the turbo setting. So I think a lot of highly sensitive people, it's it soothes our anxiety because we feel like, oh, I'm dealing with these emails, I'm dealing with these texts, I'm meeting other people's needs, which
Yeah.
is a core wound from childhood. But it also makes us more anxious because we feel never truly alone. We're never
Yeah.
really off the clock with meeting other people's needs.
Amen. And then add on to that as well that people who identify in this way, our threshold for stimulation is much lower. That it takes much less stimulation for us to feel overwhelmed. And whether that's verbal, mental, touch wise. My husband, when he first met me, thought it was strange that we lived in Chicago, and when the air and water show would happen, like I needed to leave town, like those jets flying over the skyscrapers, I would have this sudden urge to fall on the ground and weep. But it was just so overstimulating for me. And so I think that's also another hard thing to regulate, to say, well, everybody else seems to manage this okay. Why shouldn't I? Why can't I do this? But it leads to burnout. It leads to sickness. It leads to autoimmune disorders and disease and fatigue and disconnection. Like, we have to respect where we are and acknowledge whatever capacity we have and how we're feeling, even if it's antithetical to our childhood trauma that tells us we should be doing more, or what society tells us, or what our boyfriends or girlfriends or best friends are doing. Maybe they can go out and be at all these events and interact with all these people and do 4 social media posts a day like you're supposed to do. Maybe they can do that. Maybe you cannot, and that's okay.
Well, and I'm glad you said social media, like 4 social media posts today, because if you are highly intuitive and highly sensitive, something like Facebook is an entirely different experience for you than the average person. If I look through my stream, it's it's not just that I'm like, oh, my brother had a burrito for lunch, and oh, my cousin's picking pumpkins in a hayfield. I'm getting all of their stuff. I'm getting all of their energy. I'm like, oh, I can see that my brother had the burrito, but he kind of put this other passive aggressive comment in and he's a little upset with his friend. Or, oh, I see the picture of my cousin in the pumpkin field, but she actually looks kind of upset too. And like she's faking that smile. So I'm getting all of this information about what they say is going on, what I can see going on really from the pictures and the text, and then it's a constant stream of it. So I'm getting an injection from 15 different people in 30 seconds. And it
Yeah.
just reminds me of, when you're in high school and you go to the high school party and someone's mixing drinks and they're like, it's a hurricane. It's got 6 different liquors in it. And of course you get really sick because no one should drink vodka and whiskey and tequila and rum all mixed together. Like, that's Facebook. A really highly intuitive person is going to come out of Facebook feeling like they just drank a hurricane. Like, oh, I feel really like woozy and off kilter and saturated with this person's political ranting and this other person's suppressed anger. It's not a healthy situation for intuitive people.
And I so love that you bring this up. And I think it also takes a true level of maturity to be able to recognize that in yourself. Because I know for years, I didn't understand it. Like, I can remember being very, very little, and my mom loved shopping. So we were always in malls and shopping centers. And as soon as we got into a clothing store, I would like dive into a middle of a clothing rack because it was dark and quiet and I was away from all the people. But that barrage of energy and information was just so overwhelming. And now, as somebody who makes his living through what I post on social media and the connections I have to people with that, I have a necessity to have interactions, but I can remember before I started this ecstatic self, I was off of social media for 2 years and it was amazing. Like, it felt like this window closed where my life was my own. I didn't have to pick up on other people's shit. And I felt fully private and like my energy was my own. And now, like, I can go have a really heartfelt conversation with somebody, but if they're in a really difficult place, like, I then have to be like, I need to go do my own processing because of what I've just picked up from them. And these are not stories that society tells us about. Like, especially as a gay man, I will say specifically that there's this expectation of you should be out all the time, you should be having sex with lots of people. I see my clock felt a certain way about that. You should be out being social and parties and going to white party and discos and street festivals and vacations, and you should always be out showing and sharing and connecting and being like, I cannot. I cannot do that.
I think every highly sensitive, highly intuitive person clashes with their society identity at some point. Because I'm not a gay man, but I'm a mom. And I have the same thing about being a mom where I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to be at the playground and I'm supposed to volunteer for the PTA. And I'm supposed to be posting pictures of my kid on Instagram and making really cute cupcakes and throwing birthday parties. And I cannot. I'm like you. I'm like, I cannot. And I will not. That will stress me out to the point where I have a complete meltdown. I do not do that well with children. My own child stresses me out because he's really loud and he's a little boy. So he makes sudden movements towards me a lot. And I don't like it. And going to his school to pick him up, there's a lot of people. There's a lot of other kids. There's a lot of like cars honking and dogs barking and kids playing. It's so much for me that I can't add on to that. And then he wants me to meet unfamiliar people and do play dates, and I cannot. So I love these. I cannot.
Yeah.
That's where I am too.
And, I think it's also important too to acknowledge the societal pressure we feel to be different about those things. Like, I could imagine somebody watching our conversation right now and be like, well, you little precious snowflakes need to man up and deal, because that's not the real world. And to say like that, there is this immense pressure to be otherwise. But I think one of the gifts about a spiritual path is the ability to recognize where you are. And where you are is often not where society told you you should be. You're usually somewhere different. And to see the perfection, to see the wholeness, to see the beauty wherever you are, regardless of what gifts or challenges or openings or closings or whatever's you're encountering, that there is sacredness and holiness wherever you are, even if it is atypical.
Well, and I think, we talked about media and social media. When you're on social media all the time or you're on online all the time, you get just a bit of the story. You get one facet, you get one side. So you are on Instagram and saying, well, that's how all the other gay men are. I should be like that. That's how all the other moms are. I should be like that. Because you're getting a very curated, one-sided, this is what I think the world wants to see from me. If you shut that off and slow down, and if you, really read books or personal essays or something that takes a much longer time to absorb someone's full story, you start feeling not so bad. I'm doing a project right now where I'm reading like 15 memoirs in a row. And it's helped me feel so much better about my experience. Because I'm worried that like my kid doesn't have the perfect cupcakes and the PTA mom. And I'm reading about people who, grew up during Vietnam, like in the Vietnam jungle. And they were like, we didn't have any food. We were like barbecuing moths and eating them. And I'm like, it's not so bad. My kid has a great life,
Right?
So it's perspective, but I wouldn't have that if I hadn't slowed down long enough to read a 200 or 300 page story of someone's life. And I think in our current day life, we don't slow down enough. Even like Netflix or Hulu, you're constantly scrolling for a better option. Dating apps, you're constantly scrolling for a better option. People skim and I just read one sentence and it's not helpful overall.
You remind me of how grateful I am to be in a happy, committed relationship, because it frequently will say, like, oh my God, isn't it so nice to not always be looking for, like, what's next or the next best thing, but just be like, I got the best person in the world. I'm set. Amazing. You also remind me of one of my favorite quotes, which is, don't trying to compare yourself to someone else on social media is like comparing your film dailies to their highlight reel. And I
Mhm.
love that idea. And
That's something too, and I want to say, because you said I'm so happy I have a partner. I know a lot of people are struggling because they don't have a partner, and they look on Instagram and it's all happy couples. And again, that's not the full story. That's not the full story. I'm in a committed relationship too. It's not always happy. There's a lot of work, but you don't see that on social media. You don't see the complexity. That's where I feel like it's really unhelpful for people. You don't see the complexity.
yeah, yeah, something that I was reflecting on too is also like I often feel a lot of body pressure as a man of needing to be more muscular. And you look at Instagram and it's like all these steroided people who look amazing, but then you don't necessarily realize like they're dealing with like a lot of mental health issues that come from using those drugs. There's a lot of health issues that come that they might look good, but they're feeling like shit and they're paranoid and not connecting with other people. And like you don't know what somebody else is going through unless you sit down and hear their full story, which often social media does not, but things like books do. And things like hopefully these longer sort of conversations like we're having today are able to do more.
I think that's also a way that social media is very harmful, because the ego already wants to tell you that you're the only one who has it hard, right? The ego always wants to tell you that other people have it easier, other people have their shit together. It's just you. You're the one who is really struggling, or you're the one who's really messing up. But if you actually talk to people, if you read their stories, you listen to them, you start connecting with people and openly sharing, you realize life is hard for everyone. If you came in to planet Earth during this time in this incarnation, and I would actually say at any time, planet Earth is a hard school.
Yeah, it
No
is.
one gets out unscathed. No one. You can pick somebody and say, well, they were born with a silver spoon in their mouth, and they were from an incredibly wealthy family, and they're good looking and they're white, and they still have problems. They've got something. If they're a human being and they're alive, they've got something. And if they don't have it now, it's going to hit them later. So life is hard for everyone. It's not just us, and social media really feeds into the ego of like, no, it's just you. Look at how easy everybody else has it.
Yeah. They're in Ibiza and they're having fun on the beach. This is what your life could be.
Hmm.
So, question
Yeah.
for you, Lauren. So, we've got a lot of people who engage with my channel Ecstatic Self who identify as spiritual people, but I don't know how many of them would identify as artists or writers. I think a fair few of them. Can you share with me what you think the benefit for somebody who identifies as being in a spiritual path? And I have my own ideas, but I would love to hear yours. What is the benefit of creating art as a spiritual tool for your own evolution, for better self understanding, for healing, for growth? How can embracing art creation, writing, or whatever type of art be beneficial for a spiritual journey?
So I think the word artist and the word writer, and especially author, are very loaded words. And a lot of people have baggage around them. A lot of people who are drawn towards drawing or painting or making things or writing songs or stories or poems, they feel weird about calling themselves an artist or a writer, because they see that as, I need to be paid for my work, or I need to have won an award, or I need to have gone to school. Like there's some sort of bar that they
Yeah.
need to meet that they haven't met. So I really see the personal expectations come in there. Making art is not about winning awards. It's not about, if you want, you can sculpt a career out of it, but it's not really about that.
Yeah.
Making art is about self expression.
Yeah.
And it's been my experience that people who are on a spiritual journey have usually come to that spiritual journey because of some very hard experiences in their past. Usually, experiences where they felt they were not able to speak up, they were abused or exploited, they were repressed, they were dismissed or ignored, they were mocked or shamed. Very severe, deep, painful psychological experiences, which actually opened them up and opened them up to, well, maybe I am more than this body, and maybe I am more than these experiences, and maybe this isn't just it. I'm going to start looking outside, you know. Making art is part of that. Making art is you reclaiming your voice. It's you pushing yourself out of the box that you've been in and really asking yourself, what do I think? What do I feel? How do I see the world? And then making something from that. And it could be anything. It can be a traditional painting or a traditional novel, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
It could be half collage, half clay sculpture, half Play-Doh. I mean, it can be anything, but it's you as a human being saying, there's something inside of me and I'm going to pull it out and I'm going to make it into a thing. Here you go. That's basically it. And it's so liberating. And it's really fun. Once you can drop the expectations and the baggage of like, this needs to be good or this needs to win an award, it can just be really fun. And it can help you explore hidden corners of your soul that you didn't even know were there. So I think it's essential, honestly, even if you've never thought of yourself as a creative person, if you know you're on a spiritual journey, I think making art is something you at least owe yourself to experiment with.
I so love all of that. And I agree wholeheartedly. And I also want to say, too, I think a lot of people are also afraid to call themselves an artist or to even create because at some point someone told them they weren't good at it. Oh, you're not a good singer. Close your mouth. Who are you to be a painter? Who are you to be a writer? And I truly, truly feel one of the most detrimental things you can do for an artist is tell them that what they created is bad. It's not bad. It's an expression of their soul. And if you don't connect with it, it's not that the art was bad. It's just it's not for you. It's not speaking to you because there's always something to connect with, whether it's the humanity or the intent. And, you know, it's personally why I don't believe in writing negative reviews about art. You can say, great, this artist created this thing. I didn't connect with it. It wasn't for me. That's fine. But to go in and say, well, you created an inferior piece of artwork, it's like, no, you created what your heart was called to create. Whether it's a critical success, totally separate thing, right? If millions of people want to buy it, but there's no such thing as bad art.
Oh, yeah. I always say with my clients in my classes, there is no good or bad with writing. There's rough and there's polished. And rough, you can always get to polished. It's just a matter of time. And deeper than that, when I look at a book or I look at a manuscript someone sent me or any piece of writing, I feel like it's you or it's your mask, right? So some pieces of writing, it's you. Your life force is in it. Your energy is in it. I can feel that. It feels alive.
Yeah.
It feels like it has soul. Whether or not I agree with it or I can relate to it doesn't really matter. I can feel the life force energy in it and it's honest.
Yes.
And then I'll pick up other pieces of writing and I can pretty quickly say, this is just a mask. This writer is writing what they think they're supposed to write, what they think people want to hear, what they think the correct view is to have on things today.
Yeah.
And it feels dead to me. It feels hollow. It feels empty. And there's nothing, I'm not saying like they're a bad writer. There might be a whole lot of skill in there, but the life force isn't there. It's the same as when you meet someone at a party and some people you're like, oh yeah, they're really themselves. They're really comfortable in their own skin. And other people you're like, oh, they're really heavily identified with that mask.
Yeah.
And it feels kind of weird to be around them because they're so, you know, struggling with that.
Yeah. You remind me of when I was in college, I took a history of rock music and theater class. And I remember the professor talking about Avril Lavigne and how she was designed because some label executives thought, hey, there's this demographic where a pretty punk girl would do really well. So let's find somebody who's attractive, who can sing. We'll teach them to play the guitar. We'll teach them how to stand, and we'll create this character. And that's what I guess Avril Lavigne started out as. And I don't follow her music, so I can't speak to her as an artist or what she does now. But, there's a lot of music, there's a lot of literature, there's a lot of things that are incredibly popular, really well advertised, that people have heard about, who, as you say, are written from a mask, who are not written from this genuine life force. But similarly, I don't find that interesting. I don't care who you pretend to be. Share with me the marrow of your soul, please.
Yeah, when you said Avril Lavigne, I really thought of Britney Spears. Because, I grew up in the 80s. And so I think when she got big, I was already in college and I was already really coming into my intuition. And I always saw something wrong. The entire time, I was like, she's being used. She's all mad. Like, she's still her, but her has retreated far down inside. And she's just working with this mask other people have put on her and have forced her to wear. And she always felt like a tragic figure to me. That was where it was interesting. That's where I really did find myself interested in her, because she felt like this tragic figure who was really struggling and really going through real human pain. The sort of persona created for her of, I'm this barely legal sexual being and now I am legal. And that didn't hold very much interest at all. That was a very one-dimensional role that I've seen in so many other times and places. And I think when you are a creative person, when you're highly sensitive and highly intuitive, you respond to the realness. You don't respond very much to masks. Aren't that interesting? That's the thing. They're just not. They're like advertising slogans. Advertising slogans are not that interesting. They're pretty boring.
You make me think of Judy Garland, about part of what makes her such an interesting singer to listen to is she has unquestionably a beautiful voice. But what's so interesting about her is you feel the pain, you feel the tragedy of her life as she sings, and the amount of humanity that is displayed when you engage with her is breathtaking in a way.
I think highly intuitive people are often drawn to tragedy. If you ask a highly intuitive person, Shakespeare, comedies or tragedies, we'll always say like the tragedies. I like the pathos,
It reveals our humanity. I always say the hardship either shuts us down or cracks us open. And as you said just so lovely a few minutes ago, when it cracks you open, that's when you realize your spiritual gifts. And just a little caveat just to say, I do not believe that you have to suffer to grow spiritually, that you can grow through love and grow through acceptance. You do not need to force yourself to suffer to be a better spiritual being. But for most people, it is an important catalyst to one's spiritual growth.
Well, and I want to bring that back around to making art as a spiritual practice, because when you fully engage with your creative process, with making art, you're going to be challenged on everything. Your control issues are going to be triggered. Your anxiety is going to be triggered. Your need to know is going to be triggered. All of that stuff's going to come up, and you are going to see the parts of you that feel very scared and very unsure and very vulnerable, and you're going to have to work with them. You're going to have to work through it and keep going through it to get to the other side. That's what art demands of you. Even if you are just making something out of Play-Doh. I guarantee, if you are finger painting or making something out of Play-Doh, you're going to have an idea in your head of what it should look like. You're going to start to shape the Play-Doh, and then your inner critic's going to show up. And you're going to be like, oh my God, 4-year-olds do this with Play-Doh, and you can't even make a little figurine. What's wrong with you? Like, all that stuff's going to come up, no matter what the medium is you're working with.
And to reprogram ourselves to see the perfection, to see the holiness, to see the beauty, even when it's not pretty.
If you keep going with it, you'll get to a different place where you're sitting there with the Play-Doh and you're not so focused on what it's supposed to look like. You're enjoying the feel of the Play-Doh. You're enjoying the fact that it's bright pink Play-Doh and you like bright pink.
And it smells
You're
wonderful.
enjoying the fact that it smells like Play-Doh. Like you're having an experience, and then you're like, oh, this is the point. This is the point, not what it looks like in the end.
And what a beautiful extrapolation too for spiritual work overall. which is the point is the process. The point is not the results. It's not the state you achieve. It's the journey you're taking.
Mm-hmm. Because you're never going to be at the results. You'll be at the results for like 1 second, and then you're right back in the process. So like the results aren't even really there. It's you don't get to a state and then you live there. That's not how it works. You're still human.
Yeah. It's like what happens if you hit enlightenment? You keep working. Great. Congratulations. Keep going.
Mm-hmm. I think Jack has a book that says enlightenment and then the laundry. Reaching enlightenment and then you fold the laundry. But it's something like even when you're enlightened, you still household chores. You know, you still dishes in the next day.
Well, speaking about writing and meditation, I think this is probably a good opportunity to announce that Lauren and I are going to be collaborating on a monthly meditative writing workshop that we're going to host here on YouTube. I believe our first one's scheduled for the third Sunday in July. And we're going to do 20 minutes of a meditation together, followed by 40 minutes of silent writing. So whether you identify as a writer or an artist or not, it doesn't matter. This is a really great opportunity to come open up, get out of your own way, open to something deeper or higher, and allow it to flow through you and see, what do you discover about yourself? What do you discover about your creative abilities? What do you discover about your shadow and your light bits? And I'm so excited for this collaboration. I think it's going to be a really wonderful, healing, and exploratory experience for a lot of people.
Well, and I just want to say, I've written all my books through silent writing. I wrote my first book entirely in a silent writing program. Mm-hmm. People who have never done silent writing before, they always are like, I don't get it. What's the point? Why would I show up and just write with people over Zoom? I could just do that on my own. It's different. It's a magical space. I've done it, programs that I wasn't running, that other people were running. I've done it in person in cafes, in loud and noisy cafes. I've done it in libraries. I've done it over Zoom. I've done it in many, many different ways. And it really is always the same. There is a group energy and there is a space that opens up. And that group energy and that space will help you write. And almost every time, you'll be really surprised. That's what I always hear at the end of every session, because I do these sessions regularly. People say, I'm so surprised. People say, I showed up, I didn't feel well. I really didn't want to write. I felt like I didn't have anything to write. And then a character showed up. And I started writing about this character. Or they'll say, yeah, I started writing a book last year. I gave up. I didn't, I have a lot of resistance. And after the hour, they're like, I feel reignited about that idea. I started writing on the book again, and that's shocking. But that's what I hear from people always. I'm surprised. I'm shocked. I can't believe that happened. I can't believe that came out of me. People say I wrote 3 songs in 1 hour. That's never happened before. This really happens. It really does. So you don't have to identify as a writer. You don't have to have a project you're definitely working on or an official project. You don't have to have any idea of what you're going to write about. You can literally just show up with a pen and a pad of paper and say, I'm just going to see what happens. That's it. And you will have an experience. I can promise that.
I love that. And I think that just also speaks to the power of community, right? That as much as we are on our own journeys, when we journey together, when we explore together, we go further faster with a lot more fun than when we're isolated.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the other thing. People always say, they say I worry so much when I write, or I'm so critical of myself, but here I felt really safe. I felt really held by the group. And I usually do, I know that you do meditation quite a bit. I do like a guided meditation of, let's connect to our hearts. Let's send love around the group. So we really do energetically connect before we start writing together. And with silent writing, there's no sharing. There's no critiquing. If you want to leave your camera off, fine. If you want to show up as like completely anonymous and you never want anyone to see your face or know your name, that's fine with us. It's a safe space. You do you. You don't have to stay the whole time. If you're like, I started writing and I got triggered and I need to go lay down. Cool. Exit early. It's all good. There are no rules here.
I love it. Love it. Well, I love you, Lauren. I am so excited to get to explore this with you. I'm so delighted to have further conversations with you and get to share with other people. I know this is going to resonate with a lot of individuals. And I also know that you're very busy. So thank you so much for taking time out of your very packed, but hopefully slow schedule to share your wisdom, your insights, and your heart with us today.
Well, thank you so much, Kay. This was great. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my sincere pleasure. Please check out Lauren. She's got a fabulous YouTube channel of her own. I'll put the links below. As she said, she's on Twitter. Her mailing list is pretty awesome. She's offering courses all the time. So check out her website. And she's a wonderful, wonderful person to get to know and connect with. So I'm just so excited to continue to build this relationship further.